This is Psychedelic Therapy Frontiers, the podcast devoted to exploring the frontiers of psychedelic medicine and what it takes to cultivate a healthy mind, body, and spirit. I'm clinical psychologist Dr. Steve Thayer, and today my co-host Dr. Reid Robison and I are joined by Dr. Alan Davis to talk all things shamanism. Alan is a physical medicine and rehabilitation physician and shamanic practitioner. Alan helps us explore the roots and practice of what he calls core shamanism, shamanism as it relates to psychedelic medicine, shamanism's ties to various cultural traditions, and the overlap and integration between shamanism and Western medicine. We had so much fun talking to Alan. He's got a great spirit, a great laugh, a great sense of humor. He's smart, compassionate, and really has a ton of experience with shamanic practices. So I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did and as much as Reid did. Please enjoy. Welcome back, everybody, to Psychedelic Therapy Frontiers.
Hello.
We're here again. Dr.
Hi.
Steve Thayer, Dr. Reid Robison, and today we were joined by Dr. Alan Davis. I said your name right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I had this brain fart immediately. I have this huge paranoia because I'm a mental health professional and I'm with people and they're super vulnerable and I have a terrible memory for names, and so I'm always really afraid about forgetting names. Anyway, with that unnecessary preamble, would you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm a physician, physical medicine and rehabilitation, and I mostly do hospital work. But what I'm here to talk about today is sort of the blending of working inside healthcare as a traditional clinician and bringing in shamanism to that work.
Yeah, this is something I'm really curious about, have very little knowledge about, but there are some interesting overlaps with, the title of our podcast is Psychedelic Therapy Frontiers, and, and we really mean psychedelic in the true sense of the word, like wandering in the mind, the manifestation of the mind, not just the medicines that make you have interesting journeys. So I'm curious about the overlaps between shamanism, and psychedelic medicine. We'll talk about non-ordinary states of consciousness. It'll be a good conversation. But why don't we start, if you're okay, with an exploration of what shamanism means? Because I think for a lot of people in our audience, they think of the word shaman and a variety of images show up in their mind. So educate us, Alan. What is shamanism?
Well, the shamanism, what's a shaman? It's sort of like the word is got such a broad meaning now because it's really part of our pop culture. Somebody sees somebody who thinks they're really cool and like he's a shaman doing whatever he's doing. But from a place of indigenous wisdom or somebody who studies shamanism, you could say shamanism is really working with energy. We're really working in the non-physical realm. One of my teachers, Sandra Ingerman, would say, we are gardeners of energy. Mm-hmm. And it's really working in that space. From an indigenous perspective, you're working with, you could say, helping spirits. But when you strip it all away, it's sort of an intelligent energy that is throughout all of creation. And we work with that energy. That being said, I wouldn't say we're like energy workers because it's a little bit different approach than an energy worker, but it is working with energy to shift things. You could say the initiation process of a shaman is like gathering power to be able to affect change on an energetic level.
Well, this is really interesting. I have so many questions,
Yeah.
but I'll try to pace myself.
Tone it down, Reid.
But I'm just thinking of the shamanic path, like the role of, do you have to get struck by lightning to be a shaman, for example? What's the role of madness? What's the path of a shaman like? And what are the differences between indigenous shamanism and, say, core shamanism? If you could touch on that.
Great question. So from in ancient times, a shaman was someone who did have a series of initiations. Often, and even in modern day indigenous shamanism, like Tibetan shamanism, there is like, it's a bloodline. So it is like direct from parent to child, usually father to son. And they, like in Tibetan shamanism, they are waiting for a sign that that child is going to be a shaman. Now, let's just take a step back and explain that shaman is a very specific word to one culture that is like a indigenous part of Russia where that word comes from. And every indigenous culture has their own word, but that is the generic word that we use in our society now as shaman. But a Native American wouldn't call their medicine person a shaman. They have their own. Somebody who's in South America and in, working in the mountains or in the jungles wouldn't call their person that does this work a shaman. But we're, just for the sake of everybody knowing what we're talking about, we're going to use the word. But so traditionally, there was a series of initiations and often near-death experiences. One of the things that may have brought this person's potential as a shaman in an indigenous culture was going crazy. In an indigenous culture, completely losing your marbles could have been a sign that this person may have a special connection with the helping spirits or something beyond, and maybe a sign that they're showing that they have the beginnings of some power. So it's often a series of initiations, some of them being spontaneous, like being struck by lightning or having a near-death experience of some other way that just happens to you. Others created by your culture to see if you have the mettle to do this work. Placed in difficult situations, like an initiation of and even some of the other similar pathways, like they'll put you in freezing cold rags or some that's part of like the Tibetan culture. That could be part of their priestly thing, but it's a similar thing, putting you through the tests to see if you are worthy and will be able to be the person for the community. Because in the end, in the oldest roots of shamanism, if it weren't for shamanism, humans wouldn't be alive nowadays, because the person that exhibited the special traits of being to connect to something beyond themselves was the one that could go out and connect with the animals so that there was food, connect with the plants so that they could survive as a species, or work with the spirits of nature, the weather. This is the roots of shamanism. It's the oldest spiritual practice, tens of thousands of years old. That being said, if you strip away the cultural trappings of shamanism, you have what was popularized by Michael Harner called core shamanism. And what Michael did was say, what is sort of common when you look at shamanic cultures the world over? And what he found common was number one was the non-ordinary state of consciousness. And he said, and working in the Foundation for Shamanic Studies, that's his organization, one of the first things you do, the very first workshop you take, is learning how to journey. That is like your 101. And learning how to journey is getting in that non-ordinary reality state. And then the core kind of healing work that is common would be like divination work, finding information in that non-ordinary state, doing a power animal retrieval, which is finding like one of those energy bits that are attached to your soul. You personally have your own group that are here to support your soul's journey. Or soul retrieval, where there's a part of you that's not accessible. Doing extraction work, which is removing something that is in your energy field that's impeding the flow of the energy and causing you distress. So these are like common things that one way or another can be seen across cultures. Now, that's not an exhaustive list. Working with the spirits of nature, would also be another one. So but core shamanism, you don't have to be of the culture to explore core shamanism, which as a person from the United States is very appealing because I'm a mutt. Like many Americans,
Right.
I've like my mother's family's from one place, my father's family's from multiple places, and if I were to say, well, if I were going to explore my indigenous roots, it would be a little confused mess. So that's that. But core shamanism was my way into shamanic practice.
So it's independent of any particular ideology. You don't have to be of a particular cultural or religious background. Sounds like it has some fundamental principles that are broadly applicable.
Yeah, I think one of the core things would be, yes, there is the difference between shamanism as a spiritual practice and religion is there is no required belief system. You do not have to believe anything. And most of my shamanic teachers would say, don't believe anything. The only thing that matters is your experience. You learn how to trust your own experience and learn directly from that. So it is a path of revelation, we would say.
So how does that work with, say, ayahuasca as an example? Assuming that the ayahuasquero is the shaman in this case, right? And, they say that originally they would drink the medicine. The participants would go sit there in ceremony and receive the divination, the teachings, the insight. But now, in part perhaps because of, people from the U.S. and Canada going down and seeking this and saying, hey, I want the medicine, it becomes more of a participatory experience with the medicine. I don't know if that's accurate or not. That's what people talk about. But I'm wondering if it's about not believing and just not needing to believe anything, but about the experience. How did it work back then? Was everyone just open to the insight of the shaman with respect to their experience, their life?
That's another great question. So the invitation to that question is like, how did people traditionally view ceremony? Right? So ceremony, like nowadays, we have a lot of ceremonies, but I would say the big difference between now and then is that if you were an indigenous culture and you were going to participate in any kind of a ceremony, if you were not completely on board with what that ceremony was for, why you were going, what you were supposed to get out of it, you would know intuitively that you could not participate. Everybody has to have a clean mind going into ceremony. So in those days, the people themselves would come prepared as an open channel to receive the wisdom of the plants as taught by their shaman.
So a clean mind meaning like an empty cup, like a receptive mindset going into it, where they're just open to receive.
Yeah, well, like if I were going to do a plant medicine ceremony now, back then, I couldn't go in, I would not consider going in thinking like, maybe this is a bunch of baloney.
Yeah.
I would absolutely recuse myself. I would not go if I had any doubt about what this was for and my role, because the community played a key part in the ceremony. They were, it was not like you just go and we're like, well, let's see what happens. It wasn't like that. It was more of like, you're there for a purpose, and the purpose is maybe healing somebody or maybe connecting with the spirits of the place because something was needed.
But now it's a little different. Our skeptical society perhaps goes down to the jungle seeking who the hell knows what. They want healing or something, but the medicine plays a different role in breaking through those walls of skepticism, resistance, lack of openness, perhaps.
Perhaps I would the medicine, taking the medicine as an individual is a probably, I wasn't around back then. At least I don't remember that life. Perhaps I was. But nowadays, people are going as seekers still. Most people are going to, if they're going to spend the time and the money to go down to the jungle, they're seeking something. They may not even know what they're seeking. And they may not even have a clear intention of what they're going down for. They just may have this like need. They just may have a drive and a calling. They may just have that. And in that case, the way it's set up is still really important. You still have a good facilitator, a tightly held container, and everybody is told how they're supposed to behave, how they're supposed to show up. So there is some preparation, often dietary and and attitudes and abstaining from this and things of that sort. But for teacher plants, ayahuasca being one of them, the teaching comes directly from the plant. And your attitude still makes a big difference. For example, with ayahuasca, most plant medicine, there's an invitation to work with it. And if there's a lot of fear going into it, the experience is very different than being willing to work with it. For example, the fear of throwing up. People, if you're one of the many people that are like, I don't want to throw up, I don't want to throw up, I can't do this, and the whole focus is like just gripping, the chair and saying, I can't, then you have a very different experience than, there's an opportunity for to work with this. Okay, so if I just let go of the fear of vomiting, or just say, if I throw up, it's okay. It's a very different experience. So the way you go into it is very important, and everybody gets different teachings. If you've done the same medicine many times, you get different experience every time. Sometimes it's powerful and life changing, and sometimes you feel like you just didn't lift off. It's just different.
So a throwing up story, just to throw in here, is I was out of the country working with ayahuasca, actually helping as a co-therapist and medical support for a number of ceremonies, but then got to participate towards the end, like the last night or two. And the shaman, who I knew quite well by then, had me come up, and he was doing some chanting. I was on the medicine mid-ceremony, and I'm sitting there, and he's Shipibo chanting, and it was powerful. That brings a wave of nausea for me, like there's energy moving. But I have this natural resistance to vomiting. Like I didn't even bring my bucket with me. So it was back there. I'm like, oh no. So I'm in my head, a little distracted. And I'm like, okay, Reid, you got this. Breathe, don't throw up. Because what am I going to do? I could have asked for help, of course. I could have done a lot of different things. But it's funny. Fast forward till the next morning, we're having breakfast. I'm sitting there with the shaman, Dave. Amazing guy. And we were just talking about the night. And I was like, yeah, when you were chanting, I almost threw up a few. He's like, Reid, what the hell were you thinking? Like, let it go through. Why do you think I'm chanting? Why do you think I'm doing this work? To help things like move through you. So it was, perhaps an illustration of what not to do with that energy and the resistance.
Yeah, I mean, often those icaros are actually designed to make you throw up, because throwing up is getting rid of some of the hucha, that stuff that's the energy that doesn't serve you. But yeah, it's a different experience, and it's part of the healing, like working with the energy. So he was trying to use the icaro to do some healing work with you, and doesn't mean you didn't get healing work. It's just a different experience.
Yeah, I learned a lesson from it.
Yeah.
And purging happens in different ways, right? I mean, people often talk about vomiting with ayahuasca, but purging can happen through laughter or dance or crying or spitting or shitting. I remember a shaman telling me that if you vomit and poop at the same time, we call that the gold star. And I suggested maybe brownie points would be a better metaphor. He liked that.
So the first time I ever drank ayahuasca in the jungle, my first ceremony ever, we drink, sit in silence as a circle in the ceremony, meditating, breathing in the dark, under the stars. And about 30, 45 minutes into it, the shaman starts chanting. People start throwing up. Is this orchestra of throwing up? Mm-hmm. And for me, what came up was just tears. They just flowed for a very long time. And the interesting thing, I didn't know where they were from. There wasn't like, a memory or emotional state connected to it necessarily. It was just like, it felt like a release of unshed tears, a lot of them. Yeah. Mm. And in a really kind of blissful way.
Yeah, tears. What a great healing. I had a not with ayahuasca, but with psilocybin. I had a really powerful healing tears experience. I cried for literally like 3 hours straight.
Wow.
And I mean, I was completely washed out, but it was like cry. The saying "cry a river of tears." I didn't know what that was until that time. Mm-hmm. But boy, that was an amazing experience.
So, the two of you are talking about moving energy through a person, right? Mm. That seems to be a primary, what would you call it, objective of a shaman when they're doing healing work, among other objectives, perhaps, is because you mentioned energy and energy work, and that there is I think you called it an intelligent energy in all things, in the world, in us. And I loved the metaphor of a gardener of energies, because a gardener isn't somebody who like forces their will on their environment. A gardener is somebody who works with the environment to cultivate and create an environment, a nurturing environment, so that whatever is there can grow, can maximize its potential.
Absolutely.
So I like this concept of moving energy through, because as a therapist, sometimes I think of it that way when somebody's coming to me for help, is they have emotional energy that's blocked up. Even Freud talked about this hydraulic model of libido, right? Of that you have these psychosexual stages where libidinal energy gets stopped if you're not moving through the stage with love and support and insight, and it gets cathected into these fixations, right? I think this idea of energy has been present in a lot of the ways we try to understand psychopathology, but just the human mind.
Well, I think the core of it is that we are all connected. Mm-hmm. I mean, there really is no separation. Like in my shamanic work, it's as if I am a cell in a tissue as part of an organism. When I'm in that state, I can feel my place. Like I can feel that me as a tiny speck of sand in the beach of the universe. I feel that connection. And if you work with the premise that I am in relationship with everything, every single thing. I'm in relationship with every cell in my body. Like this body, what a gift, what an amazing thing. What a wonder it is. I'm in relationship with all of the people, whether I have a conscious relationship with them or not. And so if we're gardeners of energy, the way that we approach life and our attitudes is critical. And I would say that, the core of the shamanic initiations and shamanic practice is addressing this tension between being embodied, like in a body, feeling separate and different, and often special, that also gets in the way, and being part of the all, a facet of the great wonder, the creator. We are not separate. We are all completely connected. I'll tell you a story. One of my teachers, Jose Stevens, from the Power Path, tells this story. He's like, imagine this. You're in part of essence, and you decide that you want to have an experience of being embodied in a three-dimensional existence. So you put on a spacesuit to go into this three-dimensional experience, but you completely forget that you're a part of essence. That's our life. That's what being humans is like. You go on this research mission to have these experiences in an embodied three-dimensional existence, in this low frequency, dense existence that makes us feel like, hey, you're there. Oh, yeah. Like there's something different. And we forget that we are part of something else. And that story really resonates with me because so much of my personal work and in my personal growth and healing has been trying to tap into that something beyond myself, and shamanism has been a great door into that. But yet still having this great time having a body, it's just a wonder. It's fantastic.
It's as Ram Dass would say, the dance between form and formless. Or maybe Alan Watts talks about how life is just God, the collective playing hide and seek with him or herself, right? Just like you said, put on a spacesuit, go swim out into this ether, bump into other molecules and forget where we came from. But I love what you said, because that was the biggest takeaway for me on the psychedelic journey in general, is cutting through that illusion of separation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Alan, what you're talking about has sparked a lot of different thoughts and feelings in me right now, and I've been thinking a lot about kind of the state of the world. I mean, most of us are, right? We can't avoid it if we're on social media or watching the TV, and I can't help but feel like a lot of our problems are at least partially connected to not knowing what you just said, right? Not understanding that we are all connected. And when you said it, I can picture the people I know in my mind who would roll their eyes at the statement, oh, we're all connected. All right, get out of here with your hippie bullshit. It might be the nature of the world, though, that we are actually all connected. And the fact that we've forgotten that has put us into these silos, these tribes that are trying to protect.
These wars.
Yeah.
Look what it's created.
Yeah. Now that we have othered the other people, they are bad because they believe different things than we do, or they, are from different places than we are. And it's like Reid just said, it's not only is it is the breeding ground for prejudice, but it's the premise upon which we kill each other.
It's the root of suffering, right? That illusion of separation.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, it's so true. And
sorry, it just also made me think, I've heard, so shamans are not angels or saints, they're people. And I've heard that in some cases, shamans can be a little territorial. I've heard of, in South America, this is maybe a complete diversion from what we were just on. So you're welcome to tell me to shut up, but they
shut up, Steve. Just kidding.
Well, sometimes try to hex or curse other shamans, and they get a little upset if their territory gets tromped on a little bit.
Well, let's just say that shamans are people too.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like doing shamanic initiations doesn't make you a saint.
Right.
It's a gathering of power, and you can use it, in a negative way or a positive way. I'm generally on the good witch side of things, but yes, in indigenous cultures, people have been known to, send hexes, or they wouldn't call it that, but like arrows to but the problem with that, just like it's no different than social media. When you send some negative thing out onto social media, it gathers power and then comes right back at you.
Yeah, the energy you put out in the world.
And it's
right back to
it's the same in that way. So if you do like horrible things to some other shaman that you're like in competition with, like try and send something to kill the person, it will usually kill you too. Or you'll suffer because of that.
Right. And I didn't mean to completely change the subject. The reason that came up into my mind was, we were talking about being united and we're all part of one energy. And it's that there's something about this meat puppet that we're in, this spacesuit, that causes us to feel unsafe with others that we don't understand, and try to, triggers the fear that leads to misunderstanding, and we do violence.
Yeah, because fear does stem in large part from that feeling of separation, even though we've forgotten. But it's interesting. When I went down to the jungle for the first time and was interacting with these shamans, they did give this warning that this is an energetic kind of practice and ceremony, and energy is power, and you have to be careful what you do with it. It is like Alan said, the attitude you take into it. And they talked about this red magic that some ayahuasca shamans who have gone to the dark side would use they gave the example of like using this energy and power to make someone fall in love with you or something like that, as one example, one of the less malignant examples, perhaps, even.
I mean, it's out there.
So, question, new topic. This is, was Jesus a shaman? Was the Buddha? Was Joseph Smith? Like, how do we conceptualize those kind of things?
It's funny you should say that, because one of my friends just wrote a book called Jesus, the Ultimate Shaman. And he's actually comes from a background of born-again Christian kind of a person. So he did like a whole biblical study of it. He's deeply into shamanism, and he was trying to rectify, how do you...
Yeah.
It's sort of looked at, a superficial look at the Bible would say, absolutely, that's like the work of the devil. But he did the work to say, no, that's not really, even if you look at Scripture. For me, my first gut intuition, years ago when I first got into shamanism, was, yes, this is a person that really knew how to do that kind of work. And the roots of Judaism were tribal, and it was a shamanic culture back in the day before it became very law-ridden, which is sort of the development of culture. We go from small clans and everybody's in relationship to everybody becomes a specialist, and then next thing you know, you've got a codification of laws and everybody's got specializations. So I would say, yes, I say that some of the great, the Buddha and Jesus did real shamanic work. And I think that they were really transformed by being connected to that light. But the kind of work that Jesus did, can be done. It's that miraculous work is when you really can do that kind of deep work. If you do you can do miracles. I know people that have been cured of metastatic breast cancer in ceremony and shamanic work, and amazing things have happened. It's because our bodies reflect our inner state and our connection with something beyond ourselves. That's a very long-winded subject to go into, but psychosomatic medicine is basically shows that, our emotional state, which is on a lot of levels related to our spiritual state in the world, manifests in our body. Our bodies do the best they can, but we put them through hell.
Yeah, and it reminds me of something you said earlier that I found intriguing, the connection or the role of madness in the shamanic path in some cultures, and historically especially, because in the psychedelic literature there's this entropic brain hypothesis that says that all of mental health is on this spectrum of rigidity, over control on one end, like anxiety, fear, and to the other end of the spectrum, psychosis, like entropy. And that's where the creative connections happen. And that's where the psychedelic experience or non-ordinary states kind of take you to, where those walls, those illusions of separation for the mind, for the body, for our potential of creativity, they're gone for a moment, so anything can happen. And so it gives a nice perspective on madness, because we do tend to judge that, but it's not so simple.
No, I mean, I think our society tends to judge madness. We want everybody
swat
to
it
be
away. Yeah.
We want everybody to be a good citizen. It's like, we're going to put you away if you're not a good citizen. And if you're acting crazy, that's not showing respect, in some level. You're scary, you're scaring people, something has to be done. But indigenous cultures wouldn't put people away if they went crazy. They would just create a space that they could just be crazy for a while and then watch them and maybe even learn something from them. And
well, and crazy madness is contextual, I would think, right? It's the word abnormal is something that is not normative.
Mm-hmm.
So you have most of the people feeling, thinking, and behaving a certain way, and then you have someone who is an outlier. And whether or not that person is insane or mad or this, one of these words that has a negative connotation, maybe has to do with just the particular society that they're in, right? Is this person's behavior inconvenient for society? Well, they're sick. They have an illness. Is this person's behavior super entertaining? Let's give him $30 million to make a movie because, that's fun for us to watch. So there's, Reid and I kind of talked about psychiatric diagnosis a little bit in the last podcast and how it's in some ways socially constructed. So madness in one context, I'm hearing you say, Alan, may have been not only not looked at like an illness, but respected and viewed as this person might have something to teach us.
Mm-hmm.
So the shamans wouldn't have given Britney Spears a conservatorship or something like that.
Maybe not. That's not to say every person you see who's has a mental illness is a shaman and you can learn something from them, but I don't know.
Maybe not.
But it does highlight the ego structures that get in the way of our connectedness, our creativity, our infinite potential, and are the root of so much suffering. That if we can swim more into that formless state, that unconstrained place, we can touch more into that place of connection where we all are one and where healing happens.
Right.
Absolutely.
So Alan, what are some of the tools of the shaman to help people get to that place?
Well, that basic skill of getting into into an altered state of consciousness is sort of key to being part of swimming in that non-ordinary reality. Core shamanism used the most common drivers, which were sound drivers. Drumming at 120 hertz has been shown to alter your EEG. Rattling, chanting. I mean, anybody who's participated in drum circle or done some chanting work or has done some ecstatic dance or some spinning and turning around just like we all did when we were little kids, round and around and around until you feel like you're going to fall down. Though so many things can get you in an altered state. And all of them is like we are trapped by our thinking mind. We're just trapped by our thinking mind. And these are ways to get a little bit out of there so that we can see something differently. Most indigenous cultures around the world just used sound drivers. They didn't all use plant medicine. But those were the most common ones. For me, I did a lot of drumming and rattling. I do. I enjoy chanting a fair amount more recently. I got a harmonium, and really that just like puts me out in, one with the universe, playing my harmonium and chanting. But that's a start. And then like a meditation practice or any kind of practice, you develop the skill to navigate in that reality, to see things differently. So with the work, doing enough journey work, you get connected with these, we could call them helping spirits, or I would say intelligent energies, and we learn how to work with them. We learn how to see things differently. We learn how to see things that aren't right in somebody's body, or we learn how to communicate with something in nature. We learn to dissolve the boundaries, but still knowing that they're there. That's the difference between crazy and working shamanically. Crazy is the boundaries are gone and they're just plain gone, and you're not grounded.
You're not oriented at all.
Yeah, I mean, one of the definitions of a shaman is like one who walks a foot in both worlds. It's like you have 1 foot in this reality and 1 foot in non-ordinary reality. You know where you are in both places, and you can navigate.
That's what always amazed me in my ayahuasca experiences is the shaman being able, because they take the medicine, more medicine than I did, and they're walking around ministering to people.
You can see how that helps them.
Oh yeah. Being able to straddle that line.
Yeah, with medicine or with other things that get you in an altered state, you have to practice.
Oh yeah.
You practice and practice and practice and practice, developing that inner vision, developing, connecting with the song. Like the one way of looking at that kind of healing would be the person is absolutely completely whole already. They are already healed. They're not broken. Nobody's broken. Nobody's broken. Everybody's completely whole and healed. But there may be stuff that's getting in the way of connecting with that. So, like, removing stuff that's stuck in their energy field that's keeping it from flowing right. Like, I would say you could see, so one way of looking at it is like, we are connected to something beyond, from the top of our, you've heard of chakras, right?
I was just
Okay,
thinking block
chakras, like, the chakras we talk about are the ones that are in our bodies, but they don't end there. They keep going up. Like, if you work on that level, like, they go up, 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 up indefinitely, and then go down into the earth. So if you develop the inner vision to be able to see, oh, wait a minute, it takes a jag over above the head there, and then it's just not, it's loosely connected. So you work with that to make that flow again. Or they're not grounded. You'd work with that. Or there's something stuck here, it's causing them pain. Or there's a part of them that's could be represented as a soul loss. It's very popular these days. Soul loss, soul retrieval. Everybody wants to go to a shaman and get a soul retrieval. But it's really just that, that little piece is not really gone. It's just not accessible. Like I love, you guys love to talk about internal family systems parts. Dick Schwartz, I listen to him talk. He's like, clearly, I know he's studied with Mike Harner and the Foundation for Shamanic Studies. And when I listen to him talk, it's like, the parts. That construct, that psychological construct and work is very much fits with the kind of spiritual healing that we're talking about.
Oh, I love that. I remember when I started to go deep in the yogic practices, the chakras kind of took a new life of these spinning balls of energy that you could kind of tune into, feel into, visualize. And, we talk about the throat chakra where, it might be spinning rapidly in someone who's just blabbing kind of disinhibitedly, or it might be like almost going slow motion if you can't speak your truth. And just all these ways of visualizer. I've been in classes where, you're doing breath work, or say, tantric yoga practices, you're sending your energy up to the cosmos and back down. And it's pretty evident when there's a block and you can't do that. In fact, one more story. I was in a Kundalini yoga class, and there's this one Kriya usually in a class like that where you're going to do a longer practice of some kind, and the teacher is like, okay, now we're doing today's Kriya. It's like 35 minutes of this pose, like you're splashing water into your face while breathing in and out. It's like imaginarily like scooping up water from a river and splashing. I was like, are you kidding me? Is this a joke? So I'm sitting there and I'm doing it. I don't know, 5 minutes in, 10 minutes in, I'm getting fidgety. And so I even during this, and I practiced a lot of yoga, like thousands of hours by then. I even got up and went to the bathroom, like running from myself a little bit, but I'm like, okay, I'm going back in. And I think it was like 20 something minutes in when I broke through into this other place. It was just like that formless place where all of a sudden I'm swimming in some other cosmos. And it was a reminder to me of many things, but it also highlights, I think, a little bit of what we're talking about here and some of the persistence needed and the practice.
Mm. Yeah, practice, practice. All of these things are practices. If you really want to ground yourself, there's no right or wrong. We are wherever we are in our practices. Yeah, it's a process. It's about. Yeah. It's not about a goal. It's about like when I do my sit every morning, my meditation practice. It's not like I want to get to something. It's like this is part of my practice, and it's just like it's just a practice. Like there's no goal. Practice. And it's like if you're a 25th level whatever, you still practice every day.
Like we were talking about the other week in how like a musician isn't trying to hurry to the end of a song.
Yeah.
Like, it's about being in it and making music.
Yeah, the journey is the point.
The journey is the point. And that's really, really a challenging thing in our society.
Yeah.
Like, and I would say as a person that went through training to become a physician, it's, almost all of my, life was reaching for some goal. I want to get to that point, and then I want to get to that point, and then I want to get to that point. And it's just sort of an endless future tripping that, if you let it, completely eliminates your ability to be present with the here and now.
Yeah, that insight has been the biggest gift to me from my practice, my mindfulness practice, my medicine work, this insight that the journey is the point. Because, I grew up doing the same thing, very, very future tripping. I like that phrase. Just, I'll be happy when, I'll be happy when, I'll be happy when. I'll be worthy of praise when, I accumulate, these accolades or accomplish this thing or help this many people. That's when life will be worth it. It'll be worth living.
Just be here now, Steve.
Just be here now. I know. But that is the insight I keep coming back to, and that's what you mentioned, the practice. You're both talking about the practice. That's my practice, is revisiting that insight and feeling it in my body over and over and over again, whether it's deliberate practice or just, throughout my day when I notice I'm detached from it, is revisiting that.
Remembering. Yeah. Well, Alan, we should have brought our harmoniums in. I have one, and that's a portal.
I'm the only person without a harmonium here.
We'll give you a drum.
Bullshit. Yeah. Well, my fantasy instrument is a Rav Vast, the pan drum.
Oh yeah.
They are so cool. They're beautiful looking, and they're made in all these different keys, and
I played them. My brother has one. We'll bring one of those in too.
Oh, I'd love to.
They're amazing.
I'm not a percussionist, but it would be fun to learn.
Because as a non-musician who really loves music, it's easy to get in my head when we're having a jam session or something like that. But with that hand pan, because it's all in one key, and it's really more like a drumming, like a drum circle experience. Because I don't need to worry about what chord am I playing. I just feel it. and that's why I like the harmonium too. One of the reasons is because it's simple but profound. You know, I don't have to worry about, you know, where my fingers are going across all these octaves. It's about like being in it, you know.
Surrounded by sound.
Yeah, I was at a conference when Reid was part of this Intermountain Psychedelics Symposium back in, was it 2019 when we put that on? Or early 2020? I can't remember. Somewhere around there.
January, 2019.
Yeah. And so, you know, it's this fun, interesting amalgam of academics and clinicians and then like, you know, hippies that were really interested in psychedelics, you know, this great convergence of these types of people. And so at one moment, I'm listening to this sort of university style lecture on the research. And then for the breakout session, there was a drum circle. And, you know, you had these guys doing the drums and people standing up and dancing. And I'm sitting in the back, just kind of observing all this. And I decide, you know what, I'm just going to sort of get into this and start rocking back and forth. And I didn't expect to feel anything. And I sort of did a little breakthrough, nothing like you described, but a little breakthrough. And I just started feeling really good. And I just started taking notes in my notebook, just real quickly, these wild notes. And I looked back at my notebook after the day was over, and my penmanship during the drum circle was like a different person's penmanship. Not just because I was writing fast. It was like I had channeled somebody else or whatever.
Interesting.
But that was kind of my first experience with the drum circle eliciting this non-ordinary state.
It was probably my academic talk right before that. The boring opposite,
Not
non-transcendental.
How dare you, Reid? How dare you? I remember your talk being really entertaining, and you used the Captain Planet folks to describe all the different psychedelics, and I remember really loving that.
Sprinkled with memes, at least.
Yeah, the memes were a great addition.
So, what is it about sound? You know, or why is that such a portal to this non-ordinary state?
Well, I think it's about its vibration. You know, everything is the vibration. That even breath is a vibration, song is a vibration, singing is a vibration, and even though we feel like we're solid, we're just slowed down vibration. You know, our frequency is dense enough that we seem solid, but you know, anybody who knows physics, and I'm no expert on physics, you know, would say, you know, it's just a mental construct that we're solid, because we're really not. We're just slowed down.
Electrons whirling around. Well, maybe next time we'll talk about string theory. How's that?
Sounds good.
Quantum mechanics.
Yeah. So I have a burning question. How do, say, psychiatrists and shamans work together? Or how do we bring more shamanism into medicine?
Well, I think first of all, it's just noting that, you know, shamanic and spiritual healing practices in general are no substitute for Western medicine, right? I mean, we're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But, you know, most illnesses, especially really challenging ones, have a spiritual component. And that is the part that Western medicine does the worst with, is like the existential angst of having a really challenging diagnosis, or just a whole bunch of diagnoses that are compromising life so much that you feel like you're having a hard time enjoying your day to day. And I think that the answer to how do we integrate it more, I mean, because I'm a physician and I learned all this shamanic healing work, I had a back door in. I could get away with it. You know, I could, as long as I was doing my regular medical practice at the top of my license. Then when I got a nudge from the universe that this person, say with a stroke, has a pretty significant spiritual component, that I could actually broach that and say, yeah, this is a pretty big deal. And I think that maybe you have a spiritual component to your stroke. And if you wanted to, we could explore that. that was the way that myself as a physician could do it. And when we did shamanism and healthcare conferences years ago, the biggest group of people that came were not physicians and nurses, they were counselors. That was by far the biggest group of people, because so much of it is language and attitudes.
Yeah.
And so that's a pretty easy fit there. But I think that it's just about raising people's awareness of the whole challenge of being a part of and connected to is part of the healing process, whether it's a physical illness or a mental illness or some kind of like spiritual life crisis. It's like it's helping people feel connected. I think, right now the big tension in society where we're really feeling more societal tension than in my lifetime is like we're going from this Western culture where you'll feel better if you have enough stuff. Well, isn't that like what toddlers do? If I have enough of my stuff, I'm going to be okay. It doesn't matter. You can go play with your stuff, but I'm going to play with my stuff. So if we're growing as a society, there's this tension between being a toddler and going into young adulthood with the hormones surging and realizing that, I'm connected with you and I don't know how to do relationship. And, there's this, I think that's what we're really dealing with, is this growth into realizing, ooh, we are in relationship. How do we navigate that? Some of us want to just hold on to our stuff because that's our comfort level. And others are like, I want to take that great leap and try and understand that other person a little bit more. I think that may be sort of a tangent on your original question, but I think it's about, I think it's really about, noticing that there is a spiritual component to most illness, that if we can integrate that into our healing work, we would be better off.
It feels like an uphill battle. I think a lot of Western-trained medical professionals are a little allergic to the idea of integrating some kind of spiritual perspective. Not everyone, of course, but a lot of them. Because they're trained in sort of a biological, materialistic, reductionist perspective.
Absolutely.
Right? That's the ontology they're trained on, that you are the cells and the meat that makes up you, and so we need to intervene at that level. And when they hear spiritual, they think, religion.
Because it was thrown out with the bathwater in the Freud era, especially, and we are
the opiate to the masses,
climbing back up the mountain from that, thankfully, slowly but surely. But I could tell you, there's very little, if anything, that's been more powerful in the healing journeys of the people I've worked with than something that you could call spirituality.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of physicians you talk to, and you folks can tell me because you are them, but have these experiences they would call miraculous, where all their training could not explain why this person got better. You mentioned the person who was healed from metastatic breast cancer. And people go to the jungle seeking miracles. They're looking at ayahuasca ceremonies to give them what modern medicine couldn't. And sometimes they find it.
Sometimes.
How do we explain it if not by adding this spiritual component?
This is true. But the other problem is that is our very limited definition of healing too. So maybe maybe every single person who ever went down to the jungle to get ayahuasca actually got healing, but maybe they didn't get healed of their terminal degenerative or life-threatening illness. But sometimes healing is like connecting to something beyond yourself. Maybe that is the healing. And maybe, our narrow definition of body healing doesn't really serve us well when we're talking about the spiritual realm. But, we're all specialists. Physicians are specialists, right? We are taught how to deal with the mechanics of the body. That is our training. And, it's just not in our toolkit to deal with the spiritual aspect of illness. I would say it goes way beyond, way earlier than Freud. It's like back in the 1400s where the church was given the spiritual religious life, and then there was science to deal with them. You know, it was Galileo. It was like, you know, it's like been separate ever since then. It's like, okay, we got science and we got the godly stuff. And it's been very separate ever since. And I think
tragic.
but I do believe that, you know, not long from now, I don't know, but Lord knows what that really means, we will really have a sense that the kind of work that we're doing, you know, even in a medical setting, we'll be able to work with frequencies better. You know, we'll be able to do healing work on a more working with frequencies instead of cutting and, you know, replacing hard things, or just more like, okay, well, if the body is all a different bunch of frequencies and different kinds of things, how can we adjust that? It sounds woo-woo, but if you think about what medicine was, you know, 100 years ago, can you imagine the changes 100 years from now? Assuming we're all still around.
Yeah, no, and it you're right. It is coming back in a number of ways, and like Stan Groff, in the a famous psychiatrist of the psychedelic world, talks about these psychospiritual emergencies.
Yes,
that's becoming more of a commonly used term. Or you even see like crystal bowls in some cancer centers to heal the disease or disharmony through like nada yoga or sound-based healing practices. Which is really neat. Like, we don't really know how acupuncture works, but we know it works for XYZ, and probably a lot more in ways that we just don't have the tools to understand.
Yeah, we're, you know, we are where we are right now, and the future, well, will take care of itself. But it's very exciting that, you know, I think that psychedelic medicine is a catalyst for healing people on that level. And I think that with the proper support, people can make the kind of big changes that they really want in their life, and potentially affect their physical body too, and in a huge way.
Yeah, maybe psychedelic medicine, this renaissance we're experiencing now, is kind of the Trojan horse to bring spirituality and spiritualism back into the healing arts. Not that it's not there in some context, but, you know, certainly hasn't been in the mental health field for a while.
I think it very well could be. Like we've talked about, it's not really about the medicine, the chemical, the molecule. There's a lot more to it beneath the surface, especially around the ceremony and the power of these practices and rituals, and in terms of cutting through that separation and suffering that we can experience all too often.
Yeah, which is, you know, part of what creates the controversy around these organizations that are trying to take the psychedelic experience out of the psychedelic compound. You know, they're making psychedelic medicines that don't create a non-ordinary state of consciousness. And, you know, the jury's still out. Those might be very helpful medicines, but they might be taking out the active ingredient by taking out the experience.
Yeah, perhaps. It's, we'll have to see about that. I think so much of it is about, I'll just share a little bit of one of my most powerful medicine experiences. I had a ceremony where I dreamt that I had a dream. I was one of those people that I would not want to throw up. And I found that doing the medicine, I was like just not wanting to throw up. And then I was preparing for ceremony, and I was fasting, and I had a dream. And in the dream, I saw an archway and it was covered with green snakes. It wasn't threatening at all. It was just an archway. And on the other side of the archway, there was just white light. And in my dream, I just walked through there. And I woke up from that dream and I said, oh, the medicine is preparing me for the ceremony that I'm going to have.
Oh.
And the message is, let go, just walk through. And at that moment, I'm like, what's the worst that can happen? So what if I throw up? And I realized that I could work with it instead of just trying to do it my way. And with that, I had a completely different experience. And the point, the one part of that experience that I wanted to say was, so when I did start feeling the medicine working, I said, okay, I want to work with you. And I just kept seeing myself walking through the arch and walking through the arch and walking through the arch. And when I was in the middle of the ceremony, I saw this, I kept being shown like this inner commentator. It's like, and it was, so the medicine's like, who is that person that's like constantly judging and commenting? And it's like, there's like literally like the little commentator that's like, that's good, that's not good. Oh, they're not okay, they're okay. Then it's like, where's Alan here? Where's Alan? Who is this person that's talking all the time? And it just showed like my monkey mind just going on and dribbling on. And it was like keeping me from being like in my experience right then and there. And I think the point is that it's just, when I can let go of that inner commentator, that the ego, the talky, constantly distracted mind, some magic happened. And of course, that was like probably the most powerful ceremony I ever had, because at that point I was like, okay, let's do this together. And then I had the incredible healing of like complete like attunement and connection and one with everything. It was like just amazing. But the way we go into things really affects our experience, and that the ability to have some self-observation and sort of let go was critical. And I'm going to put a plug in for my very favorite book that is a summary of pretty much every esoteric tradition out there. It's called Self-Observation by Red Trout. And he's actually a professor. But there's more packed in that one little book than all the other books and that I've ever seen. It's absolutely amazing. And he basically has just a practice of self-observation, which so many practices do, but the way he tells it, and has really funny poetry in it too, it's a very dense book. Took me 6 months to read it, but wow, it was amazing. It's, the ability to take a look at yourself and just sort of like, oh, is that so? Wow.
So we'll link to that book in the show notes, but it makes me wonder, are there other resources you could point our listeners to? Resources, written material, if somebody wanted to find a shaman or an organization to do this work?
Sure. The original place that I studied core shamanism was the Foundation for Shamanic Studies. The Foundation for Shamanic Studies, that's Michael Harner's organization, and they have teachers all over the country and all over the world, and they give workshops on core shamanic techniques. You learn how to journey and work with the spirits of nature and do all these different kinds of healing techniques. So that's one organization. For if you have an interest in shamanism and you feel like you want to, rub elbows with people on the shamanic path, whether you have a deep interest or just a casual interest, the organization that I helped found, called the Society for Shamanic Practice. They have a website, and they're an educational body, and what they have that none of the other shamanic organizations have is they're not attached to a specific school or a teacher. It's like there's core shamanic people, there's people that do indigenous shamanism in there, there's people that do shamanic crafts and all of that. So there's sort of like, there's a lot of learning. There's audio files and articles, like if you want to hear about like, what should you look for if you want to have like a psychedelic experience, and what do you want to look for a shamanic healer. If you want another organization that, if you want to find a teacher, a shamanic teacher, Sandra Ingerman's organization is Shamanic Teachers. .org, I believe it's called. And she's got a great cadre of people that do healing and teaching work, primarily core shamanism. The organization that I do a fair amount of work in, that's more indigenously based wisdom, would be called the Power Path. That's Jose and Lena Stevens and Anna Harrington, their daughter. The Power Path. They have a fantastic monthly forecast and put out tons of articles. That one, there is, and Jose has put out a lot of books. Jose Stevens, and so has Sandra Ingerman. Sandra Ingerman has done all. She's probably written the most about soul retrieval. Those have been the organizations that I've been very involved in. There are many of them out there. One that has a local office is the Four Winds. I think it's in the Four Winds Institute. That's Alberto Villaldo, his organization. Also more of a rooted in indigenous wisdom, but also he has sort of his energy work school also. So those are all places that you can find them. And here, locally we have plenty of shamanic teachers and healers.
Local to Utah. For you folks who don't know where we are.
Yep.
Wow.
And any red flags that people should be looking out for as they, look for information or practitioners to work with?
I think do your homework. There are a lot of people that will call themselves shamanic practitioners that have done a weekend workshop. So, if I were going to look for a practitioner, I would probably go to Sandra Ingerman's website, or the Power Path's website, or the Foundation for Shamanic Studies, because those people have all been vetted the most, and have a lot of experience and training. Do your homework, talk to other people. Anybody who's if you want to get healing work, if anybody says you need a series of 10 sessions for sure, and you got to prepay, better run the other way.
It's the chiropractor model.
No
offense
like
to
that.
you chiropractors out
there. There are plenty of people out there that are doing spiritual healing work that haven't done their own work. So buyer beware. That's what I would say.
Buyer beware.
Buyer beware.
Well, thank you for sharing all this with us, for being here, for your energy. It's been incredible to share some time with you.
Well, thanks for inviting me. This has been an absolute lovely romp through the woods.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been a delight. Thank you, dear listener, for listening. It means a lot to me. Psychedelic Therapy Frontiers is brought to you by Novamind, a mental health company that specializes in psychedelic medicine and research. You can learn more about Novamind's mission to increase access to legal, safe, and evidence-based psychedelic medicine at novamind.ca. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're using to listen or watch. Also, if you're feeling generous today, please leave us a glowing review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you like to listen. If you'd like to reach out to us with questions, suggestions, scathing criticisms, etc., please email us at psychfrontiers@novamind.ca. Thanks again.